Well, hello and welcome to another amazing guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and I have a treat for you. And it's somebody who's a repeat guest here on the show. And I actually didn't check before we hit record to see how many times he's been here. But we have a long-lasting, deep relationship with Brett Trembly and Get Staffed Up. I mention it here on the podcast all the time. We have staffers on our team from Get Staffed Up. Brett and his company have been sponsors of our events. So they're responsible for a lot of material that has come your way, been delivered to you. You've been able to consume, whether it's at the podcast, whether it's at the summit that we put on. And Brett is an amazing person. He's an attorney, has his own law firm. Really what happened was he was trying to figure out how to solve a problem in his law firm by delegating to staff and the large cost of bringing in-house staff members stateside with all the overhead that requires, and also what it costs to do so, and realizing that there's a lot of activities in his firm that didn't require that level of talent or the presence, and started to look at offshore talent to solve that problem, and realize this is something that can help other firms as well. And that's where Get Staffed Up was born. Get Staffed Up is now serving many law firms out there as well as other industries, and they do a great job. Like, you can go anywhere to get offshore talent, but Get Staffed Up does it in their own unique way, where they vet the talent for you. They present you with somebody who's already interviewed. You can interview them again, but really they're finding out what you need, finding the right person to fit that role, and trying to present you with the best person. Our own experience when we're trying to fill a role is that we didn't have to go through more than 3 or 4 applicants ever to get to the person that we ended up hiring, which is incredible. So he's been at this game for a while, and now he's coming out with a book. And I invited Brett to come on the show and have a conversation with me because I want to promote his book. I want you guys to buy it. So we're going to talk about that today. But I also want to talk about the topic that his book covers, because I think it's going to be awesome and impactful for you to hear it and to discuss it. My team is going to link up our previous conversations with Brett in the show notes. So in your podcast player, there should be a resources section below. If it's not there, go to profitwithlaw.com, where you can access our latest episodes. The book we're going to be talking about today is available on the page where you can also find out more information about Get Staffed Up. It's profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up, profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. And the name of the book is 24 Months to Freedom, available on Amazon. Brett, welcome to the show.
Moshe, what an introduction. I want to give you a special thank you and shout out for squeezing me in. This is my very first podcast talking about the book, and it's fun to do it with you because you mentioned our long-standing relationship. So this is kind of like the big announcement, and for squeezing me in and not really preparing or having a script, you nailed that introduction, and I really appreciate that, Moshe. So thank you for having me. I think it's only my official second time on your podcast, but we've done so many other things together, it feels like a lot more.
Yeah, we'll investigate that and see, because we may have repurposed some of your summit talks on the podcast as well. You may not be aware of it. So my team will do that job for us. And we can talk about 24 months to freedom. So it's a very interesting title because people want instant gratification in today's day and age, right? So why not 5 seconds to freedom? Why 24 months?
That's a good question. So maybe the decision that you're going to go for it and take the action can happen in a split second, right? But I think because everything starts with a decision, but if you say 1 month of freedom or 6 months, yeah, it's possible for some people, but you're also hurting your credibility because you can't skip steps when it comes to training people and building a team. As your team gets bigger and bigger, then the people you hired that you had to train 2 years ago, now they can start training your team. And so even less of your time gets taken up, and it's kind of like compounds exponentially. But the book's really geared towards somebody who just started a law firm, especially somebody who's a solo attorney, or even they got 1 or 2 team members. But and it's hard for people to admit this, but they've been going to the same BNI events for 5-10 years. Their firm looks really similar, right? And they just haven't really reached that level of freedom that they're not beholden to their law firm. And you know this very well, Moshe, because you coach a lot of people on how to put financial controls in place and other systems in place to help lawyers, to help law firm owners figure out a way so that their business doesn't own them. And that's really what the book is geared to. It's using my experience growing my law firm to over 40 staff people, including over 10 attorneys, and growing Get Staffed up to the level we are now. I've hired thousands of people, and saying these are the foundational elements that you need as a business. Yes, it's a law firm, right? But as the business of a law firm, in order to get yourself out of, you're still going to be doing day-to-day lawyer stuff after 24 months. This is not like 24 months and you're, as I make it very clear in the book, this is not 24 months in and you're retired somewhere, in the Philippines or, wherever else exotic place, right?
Drinking Mai Tais on the beach in Cancun.
Yeah.
Right?
And if that's you, congratulations. But look, I've been around long enough to know it's not realistic. We're all in the, all the Facebook groups, and there's just so many people trying to figure out little things day to day, and those things build on each other. I wish everybody would just bite the bullet. That's the wrong way to put it, because it's not. Investing in coaching is something that's so important, because we don't know what we don't know, and we just don't know everything. And so hiring you, for example, Moshe, I wish everybody would take that step. It's just crucial for our growth. But my argument is that when every penny matters, because you're so small and you can't figure out how to grow, and you can't figure out, well, how would I ever pay someone? It's really tough, and it's a difficult time in your life. And if you'll put these positions in place and do them for a lot cheaper than you would have to here in the US, you'll start to see the dividends, and you'll start to free your time. And then you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. And suddenly you're at the point where you've got some decent revenue. You've got a growing business, which you and I see from our clients, some mutual, some not all the time. And now you get to start making some really fun decisions, right? It's time to hire an attorney or 2 attorneys. It's time to expand. But if you can't give yourself the breathing room that you need to make those decisions in a non-emotional, non-afraid type of way, it's just so hard to ever get there. And, yeah, you can do it sooner than 24 months if you really are on it. But in order to train people the right way and not skip those steps, in order to have a really good receptionist, a really good executive assistant, it takes time early on to train those people. And so what we do in the book is we lay out the specific timeline, right? A game plan for how to get through those 7 hires in a very functional and precise way. Of course, using us, to save months and months and months and thousands of dollars on the hiring process when you try to do it yourself. And then at the end of that, we call it, the liberated lawyer lifestyle. What do you want next? Because whoever's listening to this, like, what you may not want a 100 attorney law firm, or you may, right? Everybody has different goals and different aspirations, but at least you get to make those decisions from a place of confidence and from facts, not from a place of fear and emotion based on no time and no money.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you have this very clearly defined as like, hey, you have 7 roles you need to fill. And I'm excited to jump in and talk about what those roles are. But before that, I want to share my own perspective. And this is what I talk about with my clients. And sometimes when I speak publicly about this topic, is a lot of law firm owners don't realize the fundamental business that they're in. Right? You think that you're in the business of providing legal services, but that's not really the business that you're in. The business that you're in is providing services in general, right? What is your inventory, right? So what is your inventory when you're a law firm? Your inventory is your people. It's the number of hours available. It doesn't have to be the lawyer's hours. There's a lot of other functions that happen, and it's all a package that you're selling to your clients. Imagine if you opened a grocery store and you set it up with aisles and aisles and aisles, right? And I've got little kids, so I'll use Pampers as an example, right? You bought one box of Pampers and you put it on the shelf and you put up a sign that said, I'm open for business. Anybody who walks in the door is gonna be like, oh, I'm here for flour. Oh, we don't have that. I'm here for sugar. We don't have that. I'm here for Pampers. Great. Here's a box. I'll sell it to you. Oh, I need 2 boxes. Well, we don't have that. Right. It would be crazy to think that you have a business because you placed one box on the shelf. And what law firm owners are doing is they put themselves on a shelf and they say, here, I'm available, but I'm also the billing clerk. I'm also the receptionist. I'm also doing all these other things. So the amount of inventory available for legal services is very small.
Yeah.
And I just don't have more of that to offer. But you don't get to divvy up all of the overhead of running a business and all of the effort of running a business amongst lots of inventory. It's all getting jammed into that one little bit of inventory that you're carrying. And that's where you need to understand what the fundamental business is that you're running. And the business that you're running is selling the inventory of the human capital. And the faster you can grow your inventory, the faster you can have more people time to sell to your clients, the faster you will get to what I call peak profitability. Peak profitability is somewhere between 35 and 50%. And most law firms are not operating in that space. You can't operate in that space until you have an attorney on staff, until you have a bunch of assistants, legal assistants, paralegals, whatever the lineup for your specific business is, but all the support staff necessary to produce the maximum result for that attorney. Well, as long as you are holding on to the attorney role, as long as you are holding on to all of those other roles that those assistants are doing, you're limiting the capability of your firm to produce peak profitability. And I think that's a great place for us to start this conversation is like, okay, I need to wrap my head around the idea that this is what the business is. The business model is, the name of the game is, how quickly can I ramp my staff up? Brett, what are the 7 roles that somebody should be ramping up, and why 7 and why that sequence? Can you lay it out for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's fun talking to you, Moshe, because we speak the same language, right? Like you're not going to meet someone that knows how to grow a business who's going to say, just do it all yourself and work harder. Like that doesn't exist. And I like your analogy. You know, I use some different analogies in the book, but in the book, I'm laying out the case of why you really need to hire people, because you're trying to do everything yourself, but you're getting paid as a $10 an hour secretary when you're doing secretarial work, which means you're taking those items off the shelf because your time is no longer available to deliver the services, right? So yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And
you're selling Q-tips instead of gold bars, right? Like
yeah. No, absolutely. And you're trained, you have a license to sell the gold bars because you're an attorney. So we start with an executive assistant always, because I always say if you don't have an assistant, you are an assistant. And that's the fastest way to free up a good chunk of your time. It's almost, I tell the story, I doubled my law firm with one hire. I went from about, $9,000 a month to 18 to 20 just by making the one hire and stopping doing. I didn't do anything new. I just stopped doing so many other things. And the math really, bears itself out. So I go through all that in the book and try to really make the case. I don't just say, here's the 7, like go after them, making the case for why and trying to connect with people on that level, because you've probably had 1,000 of these conversations, but as I'm writing, I can hear people's objections. I can hear people, well, that's not me. That won't work for me. I tried that once. And I'm like, man, I really hope I'm connecting with some people here. So the second one is a receptionist. And the reason that a receptionist is number 2 is because, yeah, I talk about this again in the book, but there's a friend of mine who has a book called The Golden Toilet. And the argument is you're going to go spend all this money marketing and all this time, which is money marketing, in order to drive referrals to your business, only to flush it all down the toilet because you have zero, you don't have a game plan for how to capture those people, how to use the CRM correctly, how to answer the phone correctly, how to set consultations correctly. Those things drive me nuts because it's such low-hanging fruit. And, that's the best thing early I ever did for my law firm was really work on the intake system. So numbers three.
Brett, I'm gonna jump in real quick. So in the 2020 Clio Legal Trends report, and I think that they've done it again this last year, but I didn't read that report thoroughly, so I can't quote it. But in the 2020 Clio Legal Trends report, and Clio does a really good job of really like going through and interviewing or researching firms. They went and did an exercise where they contacted 2,000 law firms in the US, all solo and small firms, as if they were a prospective client looking for legal services. And the number, I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but it was more than half. I think it was something like 53% of the firms that they contacted either did not answer the phone, did not call back when a message was left, or did not contact them back after the initial conversation. Which on the one hand is astounding. Like, it's unbelievable that there's that level of ineptitude in a practice of really, really smart and educated people. On the other hand, it also shows how much opportunity is there if you do it differently. And that's where I want our listeners to focus on the opportunity, focus on recognizing, like, one of the easiest ways to differentiate myself from the competition is to simply answer the phone and call somebody back.
And it just sounds so silly, but it is just so incredibly basic that, like, and we, like, I'm a lawyer, right? And I tell a story where I didn't answer a message for 3 months that was waiting for me, like new business when I first opened my firm, because I didn't know that the message was there, right? That's my fault. But it's I've been through all these struggles, Motion, and kind of like I find myself projecting on my previous self from 10 years ago when I talk about these things, because it's like they're so basic that when you realize them, you're like, wow, what was I thinking? All right. But forget about being hard on yourself for a second and just think how important what you just said is in terms of having somebody who's cheery and smart, right? And speaks good English, which all that happens offshore when you hire the right people. And we hire out of Latin America, so the English is just really, really good compared to other parts of the world for lots of different reasons. The difference,
I would argue that sometimes it's even better because some people like to talk to somebody with a nice accent. Like you get somebody who's sweet on the phone and they have a cute little accent. It's like that gets people to engage on that conversation.
Absolutely. Lot of psychology behind how you answer the phones and who answers, and you're making people feel good. Just think how much more business you can get just by picking up the phone. It's like a restaurant who opens, but then every other person, when they go to walk in the restaurant, it says close, we'll be back in 15 minutes. Like you're like, wait a minute, I thought this place was open, right? And we've all kind of had that. Like I remember in Miami, I went to a restaurant one time, but just a handwritten sign that was like, be back in a month, went on vacation. And I was like, it just blew my mind, right? And that's essentially what we're all doing out there. So I really go deeper than this conversation in the book of why it's so important, right? Numbers 3 and 4 are, you could convince me that you could swap these two, and I'm not going to die on this hill, but for me, number 3 is a marketing assistant, because at least your phones are covered, you're differentiating yourself, you're not missing messages, you're returning calls, and so now you got to drive some business into your right. You got to basically get more leads because you got
to be proactive,
right? You got to be proactive, whether it's just something basic like bi-weekly newsletters, whether it's more consistent social media. You can find a really good marketing assistant to start sending things out for you, with organizing events, whatever it is. I mean, there's thousands of examples. And then the fourth,
I like the one that I think is relevant to all attorneys. One of the first places that you can go for low-hanging fruit is relationships with other people, whether it's other attorneys or whether it's other professionals that would have your ideal client in their service.
Yeah.
And that marketing assistant could be finding those people, setting up your initial meeting with them where you can go for coffee, go for lunch, or whatever it is, and establish those relationships and then stay on top of those relationships for you. It's almost impossible for you to manage them all yourself. Mm-hmm. But if you have a marketing assistant that's sending a gift every once in a while and sending a handwritten note every once in a while, all of it coming from you, they're fostering that relationship for you. And that's really going to drive the easy money to your firm.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really what people do is lawyers. We say, I'll do that myself. And we all know the guy or girl who sends a newsletter for 3 months and then they never send it again because they get too busy. So when you like the amount of mental energy it takes to go look up new contacts, to email them, to try to set up a Zoom call or a coffee or a lunch, to confirm that lunch, via email, it is exhausting. Like you just need to show up. And you then 5 minutes before the meeting, you need to give somebody hand you background, right? Email you a background on who you're meeting with and why. So lots and lots of examples, Moshe. So let's say we're going to start driving in some leads, right? We get some more referrals going. We're building referral relationships. Next is an intake specialist. This is number 4. And in finishing building out what we're talking about with the golden toilet and not answering our phones, there's a 5-minute rule that if you don't return a call within 5 minutes, your chance of landing that client drops by like 90%. And so it was pretty amazing for me back in, I think, 2015, when I got an intake specialist and a receptionist, how I started just booking all these consultations. And I'm like, has it always been this easy? If I just removed myself from the process, returning calls for, like, the attorney should never get on the phone before a consultation ever, because now that person doesn't value their time. I talked about it in the book, but it's like, if you called, any doctor, I don't know, a podiatrist, whatever it is, and then the doctor answered the phone, right? Or the phone just went to like voicemail and they'll call you back. You're like, what kind of rinky-dink crappy little doctor is this? Like, I'm calling someone else, right? Or the doctor answers all your questions on the phone. You're like, he must not be busy, so he must not be a good doctor. And that's the impression that we're giving our clients or potential clients when we do anything other than legal work. We're giving the impression that we're not in demand. Our time is easy to come by. Therefore, we must be really crappy lawyers. And this is a hill I will die on, because you cannot convince me otherwise. You cannot convince me you're creating a good impression by spending your time being an intake specialist yourself. And too many people argue, well, I don't have the time, I don't have the money. Again, that's why we have the solution of doing it offshore. Your phones, when they're answered in another country with the VoIP system, nobody knows they're answered in another country. It sounds the same. The phone system is the same, and everything will work the same. The ideal system, Moshe, as you know, is somebody answers the phone who's a really nice receptionist. That person the receptionist patches a potential client to the intake specialist, who's higher and more knowledgeable, whose time is harder to get. That person's a little more inquisitive. They're going to screen people out who are the wrong fits. They're going to make referrals for you, because if you do a certain type of family law, but not the type this person is, they're going to send it to your friend, and that's going to help you, as we were talking about earlier, right? But for the right people that reached your firm, their job is to set the consultation and to book the consultation. All of this happening without you, so that your time's freed up. You're not reviewing anything. You're showing up to the consultation with notes from that intake meeting, and you're set and ready to go. And so by the time you do the consultation, then you only spend an hour, maybe 30 minutes, depending on this whole thing, and you're ready to book a $5, $10, $50, $100,000 engagement, because your system worked the right way. And I don't know if you have any comments there, but it's like a huge passion of mine to help people with a better intake system.
Yeah, I think these are all really, really important. And what's interesting is that, these all can happen before you hire another attorney while you're being the attorney, or with another attorney involved, right? Either way, these roles are transferable, right? One receptionist can handle a multi-attorney law firm. One intake specialist can handle a multi-attorney law firm. So it's not like, depending on where you're at, you may or may not need this. Like, every single law firm should have these roles. And the roles, the beauty is that all of these roles that Brett is sharing can be somebody who is offshore talent, which really, I mean, at the end of the day, what's the purpose of going to offshore talent? It's because they're less expensive. And the interesting thing is that we put on a law firm growth summit for, 2,000 plus law firm owners. It's a massive undertaking. It takes the greater part of a year to plan and prepare for. And when we tell people that we have 4 people on staff, they're blown away. But when you look at the cost of offshore talent at $2,000 a person per month, approximately, right? That means that my staff budget for the entire year is 4 times 2, right? That's 96,000 for the year. That's 100,000. That would be one decent employee
Right.
here in the States after taxes, after employment taxes and insurance and all of that, which is wild, because that means that, said differently, for me to have the same staffing structure with in-house employees here in the US, I'd have a cost of $400,000 a year, which is, and that would affect my business model, right? I probably couldn't operate profitably at that level, or I'd have to be charging a lot more for my sponsors when we put on an event, right? And then they may not buy it, right? The value may not be there. So what's crazy is that you can have all 4 of these roles, and it's less than $100,000 cost to you, but you've just created a way for you to be a $600,000 attorney instead of a $200,000 attorney.
Exactly. And that's the key. And at the end of every chapter in the book, I have an updated roadmap. Like, here's how much it costs you, but here's how much more you should be making, because a good hire does not cost you money. They make you money. What's costing you money is not hiring that person. That's a fact. It is an absolute 100% fact, because you don't get more time. You can't just invent more time, and you certainly can't hustle your way out of a time conundrum. The cover of the book has a hamster who has left the hamster wheel and is now on a track to beginning their way to freedom. And again, I hope people kind of get the analogy, but we talk about jumping off the hamster wheel, because we all know the people who are motivated and they work hard, but they're in the same spot at the end of the day that they were at the beginning of the day, because they're on that damn hamster wheel and just constantly moving, but never getting anywhere. So yes,
Brett, one question I have for you, and this is because I'm a numbers guy, I'm a profit first and all that stuff, right? Have you, in the book, do you identify revenue markers? Like, when you're at this level of revenue is when you're ready for this role to be hired into your business?
Kind of, not necessarily exactly like that, Moshe, but what I have in the book is based on my experience and a lot of other law firms who we worked with in conversations, is a range for, by freeing up this amount of your time, you should be able to do these other things which bring you this much more money. It's just what you said at the beginning of this podcast, Moshe. It's that you're selling other people's time. And the more of your time as the principal owner, and again, you could have a 3-person law firm. This is all, it all works the same way, because I guarantee you your attorneys are doing way more admin time than they should be doing. I guarantee your paralegals are doing way more admin time than they should be doing. So by getting people this kind of help and not having, I always say the old guy attorney we know that's has one paralegal, but that paralegal answers the phones. They set hearings. They sometimes do legal work. They do the marketing work. I mean, they're just like, they do everything, right? It's a guy and one person. It's frustrating for that other person. And if that person leaves, then you're really stuck. So they kind of own you in a sense, and they know that, and they kind of treat you that way. There's just a lot of different things, Moshe. So what I do is I go through after each hire, how long it takes you to train, right? So, because it all leads up to 24 months, and then where you should be financially after that hire. So we kind of do it like, once you're done training, you're ready for this, because you've already hit this new revenue marker, and you need more of your time with clients and on legal matters, not on marketing, not on answering phones, not on setting consultations. And the next one, which is billing. So that takes us to the 5th hire. Maybe your favorite topic, one of my if you let me get on a bully pulpit, recently. Billing is the bane of most lawyers' existence. We just sit on hundreds of thousands of dollars of accounts receivable that we don't send invoices for, or we don't track properly, or, you know, we're just like, we blame it on Clio. You know, I tell the story about my first like part-time hire. I used to have this girl that would come in on Saturdays and help me do billing, and how terribly it went. And, you know, and then I don't really know how to explain why, Moshe, but like, we are so bad at sending out
I can explain it.
invoices. No,
I can explain it.
Yeah, I can explain how, but why. So if you have a good theory on why.
Yeah, no, I can explain why. It's very simple. And we'll get to that in just a second, but I want to share a story, because this is like one of the early clients that I had serving the legal industry. I was engaged by an attorney, quite successful, 9 people on staff, $2 million in revenue. And the reason I was brought in is I'm a profit first professional, and she had earned a profit of $50,000 on a $2 million business. And if you think about that, it's like, okay, if I sneeze the wrong way, I'm losing money instead of making money, right? Like, and where I'm saying a healthy business should be 35 to 50%. I mean, 50% is $1 million in profit. 35% is what, $700 in profit on the $2 million business. So somewhere between 700,000 and $1 million is where her profit should have been, and she was at 50,000. So big glaring problem, right? Dove into the business model and try to figure out like what's going on, and very quickly came to discover that she had an accounts receivable of $750,000.
Exactly.
$750,000. Like, if you solve this one problem, you're 3/4 of the way there
to being a millionaire.
Like, there's nothing broken. There's nothing broken with your business. There's something broken with the practice that you have of how you're either vetting your clients to make sure that they're going to be able to pay you, or how you're collecting from your clients, right? So why are attorneys so bad at this? And it's not attorneys, by the way. Every business owner is bad at this. My landscaper mails me an invoice. It's great. He does invoicing, but I never hear a peep from him. Hey, how come this wasn't paid? Now, I try to be proactive and pay them on time, but I happen to know that I have an invoice from last year that's not paid because I had a question about it. And I reached out and I said, hey, I think you double charged me for my fall cleanup. Can you explain this? Never got a call back. It's a $700 invoice. It's just sitting out there. I'm happy to pay it if I owe it, but I haven't heard back from him. And business owners are like that, because getting money from a client is felt as a friction relationship. It's like, I'm trying to ask you for something that you don't want to do. So therefore, it's going to be a conversation that's tough. And I also expect that when I ask you to pay a bill, you're probably going to tell me why I don't deserve that bill, because you don't think I should have charged that much, or why am I nickel and diming you, or that shouldn't have been charged because that was my fault. So I'm just going to ignore it. I'm not going to even pick up the phone and call you, because I don't want to have that conversation, and I'm just going to let it sit there and hope that eventually you just decide to pay the bill. And that's what we do in the role of owning the billing process. One of the key things that happens when you hand that off to somebody else is you're removing the emotional part of it, because the billing clerk could care less. They don't have a relationship with the client. They don't have answers to any questions the client has. All they know is you have an outstanding invoice and I'm calling you to collect it, make payment arrangements, whatever it is. Now, if you have questions that you feel something is unfair or wrong or whatever, great. Let me take that information and then let me see if I can get a call back from the attorney, or let me see if I can get answers for you, right? So there's that middleman in between to kind of remove the friction from that conversation and allow it to go smoothly. The other piece of the puzzle is retainer replenishments. And that's the biggest problem, right? Because when you start with a client, assuming you're hourly billing, if you're flat fee, then it's a different conversation. But if you're hourly billing, when you start with a client, you put them on retainer. You take $5,000, right? Or $10,000, whatever the number is. And there's a clause in your agreement that says when it drops below X, you need to replenish it, right? You go and bill all your invoices against that retainer. So the first 5,000, 10,000 is the easy money, right? I'm not worried about getting that money because I got it coming out of retainer. The problem is that we don't have a good mechanism of knowing that the retainer is getting depleted. B, we don't have a system to go after clients and ask them to replenish it. Or C, we play mind games with ourselves saying they're near completion. I'm not going to ask them to top it off because we're almost done. All of those things are happening, and they usually happen in tandem. They go hand in hand. Often when I'm dealing with a client who's having accounts receivable issues, the real issue is the retainer replenishment. Because if you would simply be on top of that and make sure that your clients replenish their retainer, then the invoices would get paid because you're just pulling them, and you would have no problem. And the other, the mid-month billing is also a problem, right? So the cycle, for some reason, and this is another pet peeve of mine, and something a billing clerk will solve easily. For some reason, the legal industry has this habit of billing clients once a month. What other business do you know of that bills their clients once a month? It's unheard of. It's insane. It doesn't make any sense. You do work for a client, you bill them. Like, why are you holding on to it for an entire month? Why is there the need to be this process that you go through once a month to batch all the bills and send them out to the clients and move? That should be happening weekly, if not daily. When you have a clerk that can do that, that can happen. It's no longer your time that's being tied up doing it. And that will allow you to find out that somebody is mid-month and they've used up their retainer, because when you're actively working on a client, they can run out, that money can run out quickly, and you can end up with a surprise at the end of the month, a surprise to the client and a surprise to you, because all of a sudden you're not getting paid for that invoice. So I agree with you, Brett, 1,000%. I actually would even argue that the billing clerk might need to go before some of the other roles that you listed, if collections is an issue for your firm. Because if you've got an accounts receivable that's more than 90 days, that billing clerk needs to be in place before you try to get more clients, because you're wasting your time serving clients and not getting paid.
So one of the things I talk about is your executive assistant, your first hire, is going to wear a lot of hats, and they can help with a little bit of the collections early on. They can do some of the email, and then you're almost like getting that person as an assistant, right? Because they can answer the phones. Again, that when you have one person, you need them to do a lot of things. So, but I agree that a billing could be moved up, right? Part of the argument, though, that we make is that you do have some help with collections, but then as you're ramping up with marketing and picking up new cases, there's this like 6-month window where, you're going to realize quickly, like, oh shit, I really need billing help, and I'm getting behind on my collections. What you just articulated to just like float out of you because you care about it so much is basically 15 pages in my book, right? I go through about 4 challenges that we face in billing. One is capturing time in the first place, because that sucks, right? Then 2, you get like sending out the invoices, it's time, and you got to review the time entries and all that. So then you get behind, or you get a big bill like you were just saying. So then you don't want to send it because you feel bad. And then the client then gives you a hard time sometimes. So like all these things compound on each other, and it's uncomfortable, and then we don't do it. And so, the amount of AR, like I usually say about 100,000, 150,000, but I may be short. Like you just used a $700,000 example. Most firms have anywhere between $100,000 to $250,000 just sitting around, right? That is just free. You've already done the work. Just go collect it. But then the billing assistant is going to help you avoid that in the future, and they're going to know when to contact people to replenish those retainers, because you're going to put in those systems. You're going to put in the time ticklers, and you're going to send out biweekly billing. They're going to have those conversations for you. Like my law firm's financial team is 5 people. 3 of them are offshore doing all of the billing and the time entries, working with the attorneys, but from all through the part of the process, and then helping collect in a nice way. But imagine a lawyer who's so busy and they're picking up new cases, like, hold on, I got to call someone to answer a question about a bill. That's the problem with your landscaper, right? They're so busy going to their next job, they don't really want to explain to you or go investigate if it really was double charged. And it's this huge, painful thing that takes time. Again, time is so important because you have to manage your energy. We just won't have enough energy to do the whole billing system. So if you get a billing assistant or 2 in place and you put together what you just said, Moshe, I mean, your life will be so much better. You'll be profitable, you'll be happy. And that is, I share your passion with just how important that is for a law firm.
Yeah, you know, there's one other thing that you mentioned backhandedly that I want to lean into for a moment. Earlier, we said that when you hire 3 or 4 people, that could be the difference between you being a 200,000 revenue attorney and a 600,000 revenue attorney, right? And I picked those numbers actually purposely, but the reality is that continues to grow with each of these roles. So how is that revenue number growing with the billing clerk? The Clio Legal Trends report in 2021, in that report, they highlighted something that they call discounting. So they basically said that attorneys who charge $350 an hour or $400 an hour are not actually getting $350 or $400 an hour. And the reason, so what the case that they made is that you may as well set your fee at $250 an hour because you'll get more clients, and essentially when you look at all the discounting you're doing, you're discounting yourself to $250 an hour anyway. So why not start with that number and just don't do any discounting? So I have a different spin on it. Don't lower your fee, leave it the way it is, but don't do discounting. So they said that there's basically this discounting happens as you described. When you're doing the time entries, you say, oh, this shouldn't have taken this long. So you decrease the time entry. Then when you're reviewing it, you say, well, this shouldn't have really even have to have been addressed because had we not skipped this other step at the beginning. So I'm just going to take this off altogether. And then the client gets the bill and they're like, I don't understand why my bill is so high. This doesn't make sense. There wasn't this much time spent on this, or can you just give me some sort of discount on this bill? And now you shave another 10% or 15% off the bill. So it gets discounted at every step of the way. And when you look at the actual time spent and the actual revenue collected, it ends up being a significantly less number than your official hourly rate. And what the billing clerk can do is remove all of this from the process, because the attorney is focusing on the legal work and you stick to your guns. Like if my attorney I have to trust that my attorney knows what they're doing. If they spend 4 hours on something that normally would take 2, there's got to be a reason for it. We're going to bill for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And that's it. My attorney's not sitting on Amazon shopping, doing their personal shopping and billing it to my client. If they are, then I need to deal with that, right? But the reality is that in most situations, that's not the case. And the reality is we should just bill it the way that it happened. And when you have a clerk doing that, they don't need to go through all of that logic every time they're generating a bill. They simply are taking the time entry entered and they're billing it to the client. And then if the client has an issue with it, they can address it. But it will capture so much more revenue for you simply by eliminating so much of that discounting process that's happening.
Yeah. I mean, look, you could really hire an executive assistant and a billing assistant and like triple your law firm, right? I mean, if like you've got enough work coming in. So yeah, you can definitely play around the order of the billing assistant. But the reason I put it fifth, most people will do like the part-time, and then that person leaves, right? And like you can't get consistency, you get behind anyway. So like when you need a full-time billing assistant, when you have enough cases that you need to manage and turn those over to somebody. So, the funny thing is, Moshe, I'm listening to you and it sounds like, I'm glad I already wrote the book, because had we done this podcast before, it would sound like I recorded this and then wrote the book based on everything you're saying, because we're saying the exact same things and you haven't read it yet. So this is a lot of fun, and it's definitely validation from somebody who works with so many attorneys like we do. So let me zip on to number 6, right? A legal assistant. At some point we need help with the legal work we're doing, and that legal assistant looks different for a family law attorney than it does for a bankruptcy firm, than it does for PI, and PI can be a little bit different. We have some like insert boxes where it's, if you're a PI firm, maybe you need this position instead, but you're definitely going to need, like at this point, you may already have an attorney, you may have but you're going to need help eventually with the legal work, because you've been giving everything else away while you focus on what you do best, which is the legal work. But the scheduling, the filing, all those other things that you probably dumped on your executive assistant. And then the last,
the legal assistant could even be doing drafting. They could even be doing, legal research. There's a lot of things that you do that would, given a little bit of time to think about how you go about doing it, can be instructed to somebody else to do. And bankruptcy is a perfect example, right? Like you have to collect all of the information about somebody's assets and their liabilities, right? And the legal assistant can be collecting all of that, could be compiling all of it, and then you can eyeball it and say, hey, I don't see XYZ here, but I think that that's there. Or they can even have those checks in place, like run a credit report, see what's on it, then compare it to what they submitted. There's something missing. Okay, so so those are things that anybody can do. Given the instructions, anybody can do it, and and then compile it all in the right form and so on. So so much of the work that you need to do can be done by somebody else. And I think part of it is just the emotional thing of like, I feel like I need to be needed for something. And the reality is all you're needed for is your license, right? Everything else can pretty much be delegated. Okay, if you're going into court, you have to be the one to go into court. But the reality is that so many of the practice areas of people who are listening, like estate planning attorneys, right? The only thing you need to actually be there for is the signing, right? Like at the initial intake, the initial, conversation with the client, the plan, and then the signing. Everything else could be handled by support staff. And that's the beauty is that that's where the profit is. The profit is in unlocking that efficiency.
Yes.
And that's where this book comes in. That's where getting into this and just saying, hey, for the next 24 months, I'm going to focus on one thing and one thing only, and that's to delegate everything I can so that I can run a highly efficient, highly profitable law firm.
Right. Exactly. You're becoming as profitable and as efficient as you can before you start adding, high level expensive hires. And since I was going to move on to number 7, but you kind of opened the door for this one. We've got a lot of clients who we've placed legal assistants with, right? Who after 6 months, 9 months to a year, those legal assistants are so good, they're promoted to paralegal, which means, probably you give them a little bit of a raise, which is great. But now, instead of just saving you time, you're billing for their time. So that's just a profit center. So you're probably paying that person 25, 30 grand a month. And if you do the right efficiencies, they can bill $150,000, $180,000 per year. I'm sorry, 30 grand per year.
2,500 to 3,000 a month.
Yeah. Right. I mean, like the huge profit center for you when you start to look at it that way, because paralegal is the hardest position to place in a law firm. I've said that for years, and I will continue to say that because there's lawyers everywhere. We have so many lawyers walking around the United States, right? Everyone complains, all these lawyers. Plenty of lawyers out there to hire from. Paralegal is normally a glorified sort of secretary, legal assistant. Like a really good paralegal is hard to find. So most people train them. And when you're training somebody, again, very good reading and writing in English, and they become, that reliable for you, there's no rule that says your paralegal has to have 10 years of paralegal school or had to work for a big law firm. You can turn that person into a biller. And now every time you do it, you're just profiting 130 grand per year, basically, Right. And so, so then that takes us to the last one, Moshe, which is number 7, and that's the happiness coordinator. This is one that's kind of like, yeah, you can get by without one. Sure. There's thousands of firms that are profitable and happy, and they don't have a dedicated happiness coordinator. But a happiness coordinator is a client concierge. They're somebody that's going to make your firm actually stand out and look different. They're going to send gifts according to, different charts that you can set up. And there's a great book called Giftology, which really lays out how to send gifts to set you apart, from other people. They're going to make phone calls. They're going to ask how your clients are doing. They're going to create relationships with the clients. They're going to send food before a deposition. They're going to send directions to the courthouse. There's so many little things that you can do to stand out that's going to create raving fans and make people refer you business, because they're like, this law firm runs like, not like a law firm, but like one of the better businesses I've ever seen in terms of customer service. You got to work with them. like retreats. There's an unlimited amount of things that a really good client concierge, or what we call a happiness coordinator, can do for you if and when you're ready to stand out from the competition.
I love that. One last question for you, Brett. And obviously, all of these roles can be hired with a single solo attorney, and it seems like a lot. But the reality is, and I talk about this, and I get pushback from attorneys because I say that a single attorney in your law firm, let's say you hire an attorney, a single attorney should be bringing in somewhere between $1 million and $1.5 million in revenue. And they look at me like incredulously, like that's not even possible. And the reality is that when you have this level of support, that is what a capacity of an attorney should be, because if the attorney is just doing legal services, they're just doing the not just legal services, but they're only doing the things that only they can do.
Yeah.
And all these other things are being done by other people. When we look at 7 people and multiply it times 2,000, even 3,000 a month, you're talking about $21,000 times 12 months. Let's just call it 20 to make the math easy, right? So you're talking about 240,000 a year. In order for your business to be at healthy profitability of 35 to 50%, you can have your payroll be as much as 40% of your revenue, and you'll still be able to achieve that. Well, we just laid out a scenario where revenue is $1 million, and the expense, the wages that you're paying for these people is 240,000. That leaves you a lot of wiggle room to now take that money and, I don't know, maybe I hire my next attorney to create my next $1 million, profit center for my firm, or maybe I lean into marketing and I put all that extra money into marketing to really fuel an injection of new clients and unlock a new way of doing business, and then bring another attorney on. It just opens up so many possibilities for you. And that's really what the most beautiful part of this whole thing is that before this conversation, I knew that I could get offshore talent, and I knew that it's inexpensive, but I didn't know how to deploy it. And now you have a roadmap. Now you have a step-by-step process that you can follow. Just get Brett's book, read it, and follow it. And what that's going to do is that's going to basically set you up for high profitability and for a life that's really enjoyable, right? Like you're only doing your best work, and everything else is handed off to somebody else. You're never needing to deal with the friction of billing with clients. You're never needing to deal with answering the phones. You're never needing to deal with the tire kickers who are calling your firm at the beginning, but really have no intention of using your firm. You're dealing with the people that want to work with you, and simply in the conversations that you're necessary for. And I think that's just a beautiful place to live. Really excited for this book, Brett. And folks, I just want to remind you where you can go to find it. So go to profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. And there's a big banner button on that page. You click it, it'll take you right over to Amazon to purchase the book. And when you're on that page, you'll also go ahead.
Do this, Moshe. We have it right here. This is profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. Will take you to this page right here where you can find more information, or scroll down and there you go. There's the link to buy the book.
Yeah. And so for those on the audio podcast, Brett just shared his screen, but you can see it for yourself. Just go into a web browser and do that. If you're out for a run or you're driving or whatever it is, just know that if you go to our website, profitwithlaw.com, all the links that we're sharing will be there in the resources section of the show notes page for this episode. But when you're on that page, you also have access to an exclusive discount that I have worked out with Brett a little while ago for our listeners. And that's when you first sign up for a new staffer, there's an upfront fee that you pay to find that person, for the effort that goes into find them and engage them. And we have a discount of $750 available to you. And when you get this book and you read it, the next step is going to be to hire somebody. And there's no better place to go than to get staffed up to get that done. So you just put your information on that page and submit it, and somebody on his team will get in touch with you and get that all set up. But there's no reason to delay. One of the things that you mentioned early at the beginning of our conversation, I want to circle back to this because we didn't talk about it at all, is when you know that you need to hire somebody, but you get stuck in the emotion of wondering if you can afford it, right? And there are attorneys listening to this who are wondering if I can even afford $2,000 a month. And I'm rounding up, by the way, I think it's less than that, but $2,000 a month is the cost, right, of an offshore full-time, staffer that's going to be working in your firm. And if you're wondering whether you can afford it, I just want to point this out. And that is, if you're looking at it based on your current cash flow and based on your historical profit and loss statements, you're looking at it the wrong way, because every step of the way, owning business is risk, right? And risk management is important, but it's also at every step of the way, you're taking risk. And you're taking risk because you're always deploying something before it's there, right? You're going to pay for marketing to hopefully bring in leads. When you're paying for staff, you're paying for staff to create the capacity or the inventory that you're going to ultimately sell. It's not already being sold. It's going to be sold. So you have to recognize that I'm going to have to spend that $2,000, but very quickly it's going to turn into $6,000 in revenue. And I only need to carry it for 2 months, 3 months, and then it should be that role should be self-paying for itself. And that's the place that you need to come from, is not like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can afford another $24,000 a year. It's, I just need to come up with, $2,000 to $6,000 and I can solve this problem.
Yeah. Moshe, I need to take you on the road with me, man. I mean, you're really aligned with the book and what I say here, and you'd sell this thing better than I could. So we gotta coordinate.
Brett, this was fun. We're out of time. It was a great conversation. I really appreciate you coming on. Brett alluded to the fact that we squeezed him in. We've gotten really, really organized with our podcast. We're using our staffers to do the bookings, and we batch record. So I have one recording day a month now, and I do six guests. I think we're up to in a single day. Wow. And I do that once a month, and we release 4 a month. So we're constantly creating a runway of content that this gives us buffers. So like when I have exciting stuff that I do, like last in the end of 2021, we had a baby, but we planned for the baby part. We didn't plan for the hospitalization that happened before the baby. So I was out of commission for 3 months, and most of that was unexpected. And we were able to operate the podcast without ever missing a week because we had all that content batched. So we've got this whole system in place, and it's all because of the staffers that we have in place to do all of that other work. I just show up behind the microphone. And we even got to the point where there was 15 minutes before the call that I would be talking to the person to make sure we're connected on social, to double check what we're talking about, to ask them how I pronounce their name. And our staff is doing that now beforehand. So that's just demonstrating the value of having the team doing all that work. But the reality is that I jumped on with Brett on a non-podcast recording day because I heard he was coming out with this book. And I thought that it was so valuable to present this to you that I want to make sure that we're releasing this episode the moment that book is available. So when you're listening to this, it's available on Amazon. Go buy it. Or if Brett opens up a pre-order for it, then go pre-order it. But I believe it'll be available when we release this. I'm excited to dive in and read it, and I think you should too. It's gonna change your life for the better. I guarantee it.
Awesome. I guarantee it too, Moshe. I know like this book is my second book. The first one was more related to the law, but I was so committed to this one and what's the content that's in there that I am just so excited to start getting feedback from people and see what they think. So thank you for having me on, and I appreciate you. And as you talked about our friendship and our our business, dealings that we do together. And let's help more people reach freedom, Moshe.
Awesome. Folks, one more time, profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. Pick up the book, 24 Months to Freedom, and then check out Get Staffed Up. If it's the right time for you, which I can't imagine that there's any attorney out there, any law firm owner out there, that it's not the right time to bring on another staffer. Like, I've never met somebody who's at a stage where it just doesn't make sense for them to hire another 40-hour-a-week worker to do something in their firm. So if it's the right time for you, if you're ready to take that step or to do something that you've been pushing off for the longest time, take the advantage while you're on that page, ordering the book, to also get yourself booked on a call to talk to somebody over at Get Staffed Up and get that process going for your first or 17th staff or whatever you're up to get that ball rolling on another role within your organization. And as usual, we bring you amazing content here on the Profit with Law podcast. If this is your first time listening, I hope you got a ton of value out of it, and you hit that subscribe button so you get notified every time we release a new episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to our channel, because we are not only releasing podcasts on this channel, but we have a ton of content my team is releasing, between shorts, which are just snippets of stuff that we're talking about, but really highly valuable things. And also, I did a 2-day recording session, and every week we're releasing a brand new professionally produced video with amazing content that's not anywhere else on our YouTube channel. So make sure that you are subscribed there. If you're listening to the audio podcast, go to profitwithlaw.com/YouTube to get to our channel, and make sure to hit that subscribe button. Folks, I love every single one of you that's listening to this. I love supporting you, and I love when you come in here and you gain from our conversation. So I'm excited to get feedback and hear from you what you enjoyed most about this episode. Make sure to comment on that YouTube posting or on our webpage in profitwithlaw.com. Thank you, Brett. Take care. We'll see you.